Fulcha Accordia. And I want to thank my dear friend Noel Acton from Ballina, County Mayo, Ireland, for helping me pronounce that. And what that means is 100,000 welcomes, my friends. Literature Society's 48th Irish Evening. If you've been here before, you know me, my name is Ed Young, and I'm so happy to be here in Howard County once again, and to be part of the Irish Evening, which brings Irish literature and music to the community. As you may know, I live in sunny Southern California, and even in the deadest of Southern California winters, it's very different than this. Now, I thought it was cold last year, but you guys went out of your way for cold this year. And so once again, I want to say thank you to all of you intrepid literature lovers who braved this bitterly cold weather to be here tonight, and I think you all deserve a round of applause. Now, most of you know that I am the co-chair of this evening with my darling sister, my dearest sister, Anne Rice. And she, unlike her brother, detests the spotlight. So what I thought we'd do is, Anne, will you please stand up? And will you all join me in a round of applause for my spotlight? Peace, Rice, Rice. Thank you, Anne. Now, before we start, I'd like to take a minute, please, and talk a little bit about the history of the Irish Evening, because we would not be here tonight at this 48th celebration of Irish literature and music if it weren't for Patrick Kennedy, the husband of Ellen Conroy Kennedy, and one of local Calypso's founders. Pat invented Irish Evening in 1979, and it was held with great jubilation on the top floor of the Rouse Company building, and he was a warm host, liberal with both smiles and Irish whiskey. But along with his charm, Pat is also a thoroughly discerning reader. He kept notebooks for years with poems and selections from novels that he thought were deserving of a visit from their authors. Pat has recently moved back to Columbia, and while he couldn't be here tonight, we want to recognize his contributions to the Irish Evening and send him the best and warmest of wishes. So please, sláinte to Pat. Well, tonight is exciting because we are so happy to welcome award-winning Irish poet, novelist, and short story writer Caiolinn Hughes, who arrived here on Thursday from London to join us in Columbia for this evening. Caillinn's going to read excerpts from her latest novel, The Alternatives, and selections from her poetry, followed by a discussion with Georgetown University professor Cóilín Parsons. Now, to start, I am honored to introduce Stephen O'Shea, who's been kind enough to come here from the Irish Embassy in Washington, D.C., and say a few words. Stephen is the Press and Public Diplomacy Counselor at the Embassy of Ireland in Washington, D.C., and he joined the Irish Diplomatic Service in 2023 after a career in private, not-for-profit, and political sectors. He has worked as a journalist in Ireland and the Middle East. Stephen holds a master's degree in European Union foreign policy from KU Leuven in Belgium, and a bachelor's degree in journalism from Dublin City University, Ireland. Please offer a warm welcome to Stephen O'Shea.
Thank you, Ed, and hi everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with you this evening on behalf of the Embassy in Washington. This wonderful annual Irish Evening, which I have had the pleasure of learning more about over the past couple of hours, and it really is an outstanding tradition and legacy, and such a valuable thing to be cherished. I think the litany of talent that has graced this stage over the last almost 50 years is really something to behold. And as you know, in Ireland we always have placed great faith in words, spoken, written, sung and shared. And storytelling does lie at the heart of Ireland. It's how we make sense of our past, our present, and how we look forward to the future as well. And tonight's programme, Sisterhood, Silence and Survival, reflects this tradition. Through the work of Caiolinn Hughes, we are invited to engage in stories that speak to the universal themes of resilience and human connection. The relationship between Ireland and the United States today is strong and dynamic, strengthened by deep people-to-people ties and enriched by culture. And it always has been underpinned by culture and cultural and human connection. And I think that lies at the heart of the very durable and lasting relationship between Ireland and America, but also the lasting connections between Ireland and Irish. As I said, since its beginning, this annual Irish Evening has introduced audiences to outstanding writers and performers, while creating a space where culture can foster understanding and friendship. And I also understand that next year is a very special year for Hope Cailín. I've been rehearsing that all evening on the way up, as you approach your 50th anniversary. So I want to pay tribute to everybody involved on that amazing milestone, and I very much hope that I can come back and celebrate it with you. And I think the tradition of what you stand for and what the organisation and society stands for really matters, particularly today in a world that feels fragmented and hurried. Gatherings like this invite us to slow down and to listen more closely to stories and to music and to poetry and to one another. And it also reminds us diplomats and others that diplomacy doesn't always happen or have to happen in committee rooms or meeting rooms or government offices, that it happens in rooms like this, and it is essentially something that happens by people talking to each other, connecting to each other. I'm here tonight to introduce Caiolinn. I said to Caiolinn on the way out that I don't believe in giving long introductions of people that I've just met. But I will say a couple of things. Caiolinn, his latest novel, The Alternatives. I did read the New York Times review on the way up this afternoon, and I think it is a well-deserved endorsement of what is an outstanding work. She's also written Orchid and the Wasp and The Wild Laughter. She's also a poet and short storyist. But I think the best way I can introduce Caiolinn is to say that since I did meet her a couple of hours ago, I found her to be really engaging and lovely company. And I have no doubt that you all will experience the same thing over the next couple of hours. So without further ado, Caiolinn Hughes.
Hello, I can't see any of you all of a sudden, but I trust that you're there. Thank you so much for coming out. I was fully prepared to speak to 5 new friends this evening and nobody else. I'm amazed that you embraced yourselves for that wind. It's absolutely delightful to be here. It's a real honour to be part of this Cóilín series, which I've been aware of. I think just through maybe, if I was interviewing some other Irish authors, and I'd be having a look online to see what events they've been part of before, and I've seen some of Cóilín Parsons' wonderful interviews with the lineage of guests, which is really incredible. So I just want to thank Ed Young and Anne Rice Nicholas Trapper and Cóilín, who will be speaking with shortly, for inviting me. It's an honour. So I'll read one poem and two sections from the alternatives. I'm reading a poem as I believe there are a lot of poetry fans in the audience, even though I am really more of a prose writer these days. But I looked at my computer to see if there was something that I'd be willing to read, and I found something. So it's called The Party Faithful. And you're going to hear, there are the headlines from the magazine, The New Scientist, incorporated in the poem. And on the page, they're in italics, kind of offset. I think you'll be able to tell when they're, so just a reminder that they're headlines from the journal, The New Scientist. The month may be a January or June. It's been monsoons since the air was nonsense white. Hands loose by our sides like pocket fibers. Talking peer-reviewed consumer goods. Talking kitsch New Scientist articles. Aspirin helps the garden grow. How come the bonobo is so peaceable when we aren't? Naughty nylon creates a hot and bothered atmosphere. Whatever happened to cold fusion? Now I lead you outside to demonstrate a lens width of canal water where photons navigate the algae to reach a plant, to give oxygen enough for at least one fish, and we will not fry her for supper, I promise. Perhaps she will be pregnant, her hair fine bones fanning infinitesimally. Colliding nuclei give up their secrets. Antarctic sea urchins give birth despite the spines. No major changes in science before next general election. Your hand is fish cold, coiled, fish unfortunate. Like the MacBook Air, like the Dental Crown, like the smart fridge, we had best admit planned obsolescence. It's what we take down with us that counts. A publisher by accident. A demagogue by design. By inattention, the population of a distant town. Make a fist so that I know you can. With your face, the biologist said a frown engages more muscles, implying will. So do not drop that signal. Will a wayward asteroid become a moon of Jupiter? What does a smell weigh? Confusion over who pays for British science. How long is a piece of time? I'm not particularly well. You tell I'm passing moped like a poet, particulate shrouded and exhausting down the line, figuring that a single word could be the straw that breaks it. So much. So I'm going to read from the alternatives. I'm going to read from the opening chapter and then jump about halfway through. It follows four Irish sisters who all have PhDs and none of them have husbands. But one of the PhDs is honorary. She's a chef. So we have a geologist, a political scientist, a chef, and a philosopher. And you're going to hear about the sort of the protagonist, although all of the sisters weigh equally in the novel. You don't need to know anything because it's from the opening. So imagine you're on the west coast of Ireland. Funnily now, I'm just looking at the first line of the novel. The air is mild for October. And it's very similar to the opening of the poem. I'm plagiarizing my own work. The air is mild for October. Nothing shivers, nothing smokes. A gentle westerly whistles at the panes of the lamb windows like an unwelcome uncle, determined to raise the hairs on some young neck. 20 necks bend to observe the experiment. A perspex prism, known as the squeeze box, the size of a narrow aquarium, is filled with thin layers of coloured sand. This is meant to be a little bit evocative of the squeeze box on the cover. The ends of the box are movable, so that its contents can be compressed to demonstrate the effects of tectonic convergence. Thrusts, faults, folds, belts. Excuse me. Alban presses a fist to her mouth to stifle a burp, and a few students snicker. Lo and behold, geologic processes for the puny human attention span. There's something very bodily about Alban flattery that the undergraduates find wildly amusing. Moments earlier, she'd used a shard of slate to scratch her inner elbow psoriasis, and a puff of dead skin particles danced visibly in the ventilation. She placed the shard back in its tray and with her chalky fingers lifted out a teeny tiny sanitised kidney stone for the undergraduate scrutiny. Moving this kidney stone involved a person's hospitalisation. Just imagine the force it would take to move a mountain. We're not talking about violent, sudden processes like an earthquake shouldering up a mountain range. No. These forces are so incremental and immense, so imperceivable and unstoppable. There's no halting their progress. They're underway right now as we stand here on the shifting foundations of this institute. The students scan their pals for clues as to how to feel. They've learned to take what levity they can from these light and flaky moments, as Alban's lectures so far have been something of a shockwave. We are a wreck, she says. Ireland is one big crash site, where the ancient continents, Laurentia and Gondwana, collided like two humongous cruise liners, long before the nouveau riche were evolved to populate them. The wreckage cut stupendously across this island, from Dingle in the west to Clopperhead in the east. The island was underwater back then, so that story didn't make itself known for millions of years. And here we stand, sifting through the evidence of that collision in our desk organisers, all of us above sea level, for another decade or two anyways. Several students begin to agitate in the pause that follows. It's hard to read the undergraduates, to know what's getting through, what with the scarves co-grabbed around their mouths and their minimal eye contact. They all seem hungover or stoned, or just returned from a silent monitoring meditation retreat in Bali they spent their loans on. But they also seem deeply unnerved, and it's not paranoia. How information is delivered seems to be more consequential than the information itself, Alban thinks. She is losing her strength to hand it over gently. But a teacherly muscle memory prompts her now, having pushed to pull. Have any of you seen it? She makes eye contact with each student in turn, in case as first years they need drawing out. Shauna, an exchange student with the gall of a parking enforcement officer, asks, "Is it here in Galway? Because car rental in this country is a joke." It's not in the immediate vicinity, Shauna, but I saw the Rock of Gibraltar, Eric offers out of nowhere, a very tall student with asteroidal confidence. Alban hears the clock on the wall tick forward a cluster of seconds all in one go, like heart palpitations. Harmless, but horrible. If you tell me you flew down to see the Rock of Gibraltar, Eric, when you haven't taken a bus to Dingle to ogle our own monumental bodies of rock. In the pause that follows, Eric takes a seat and runs his fingers through his gelled hair, leaving striations that seem almost infrastructural, as if water might collect in them. Alban is grateful when Fionnuala, not technically a mature student, but she has a lot of cop on, cuts in with something likely to be relevant. I went to Edinburgh during the summer. For the festival, Geraldine clenches with envy. Yeah, says Fionnuala, but we took a day trip to Sicker Point. She glances at Alwyn. You did not. Alwyn replaces a chunk of granite she'd been using as a stress ball back in the specimen tray, readying herself to shake Fionnuala's hand. Fionnuala smiles. I should say Fionnuala's in a wheelchair, you don't find that out here. It was a little tricky to get out onto the rock, but it was worth it. Alwyn looks around the group. Does anyone know what historic expedition Fionnuala was honouring? Trekking out to Sicker Point in Scotland's weather-battered coast, when she could have stayed in Edinburgh town to watch shit-faced Shakespeare. Do you want to say, Fionnuala, what you saw there, and who saw it first? Fionnuala acts a touch more flustered than she is. So, James Hudwin, I guess back in the 1700s, he found these rock formations, these really crazy layered rocks, kind of like pastry. Or maybe I just associate Scotland with pastry. Sedimentary rock, in gestures, like the strata of coloured sand in our squeeze box experiment. Exactly, yeah. And there were horizontal layers like that, and vertical sections too, side by side or on top of one another at right angles. And the vertical rocks and the horizontal ones formed in totally different ways in different time periods. And Hutton basically looked at them and instantly understood plate tectonics, or a theory that led to it. Or was it just that he knew that the centre of the earth was molten rock and that was how new land was made, instead of, God making it? Fionnuala keeps glancing to Alwyn for confirmation. Because before that, she presses on, he could see erosion happening everywhere, and he couldn't understand how all land hadn't just washed away by the weather. How was there anything left? And the only explanation anyone had for new land was God. But when Hutton saw those rocks, he knew they were evidence that the earth was billions of years old instead of thousands, because those formations would have taken, a really, really long time. Pride of a surgeon confirming that they got it all, that the patient has plenty of life ahead. I know it's hard to listen to prose, but I appreciate your attention. And this is the last little section that I'm going to read, so I'm jumping to about halfway through. So the plot of the novel is quite simple in a way. The eldest character, Alwyn, their parents died when they were very young, in tragic circumstances. So Alwyn raised her sisters, and she takes off at the end of the opening chapter on her bicycle in the middle of the night and sends a text to her loved ones saying, "Don't try and find me." Now, they do find her, because it's not a thriller. If you're hoping for a thriller, you'll be very disappointed. So I might as well tell you that. But we meet her here when she's not quite landed somewhere, but she has found this pub in the county Leitrim, which has got a 4-kilometre coast. And she's getting a feel for the locals. No eyelid, and I should say, the sheep on the cover, she found tangled up in some briar. And it's a sort of teenager sheep, not quite a lamb, not quite a sheep. And so she rescued the sheep, and she's hanging around this pub because she's been told that the man she returned the sheep to wants to thank her. So this is the night he turns up. No eyelid was batted when Alwyn turned up on the second afternoon in a row, and on the third. Leitrim had the fastest shrinking population in the county. They weren't about to scare off a blow-in who seemed to know her way around a volcanic belt. The sheep husband had been located without even the use of a phone book. A horrible nice man, according to the locals. And on the third night, he came in to buy Alwyn a thank you drink. Phelan was his name. He had one of those labour dried faces that no lotion regimen could permeate. A teetotaler, but an absolute addict for a game of 25s, cards. He was awful, vulnerable, Alvin thought, deciding against it when there was the opportunity to clean him out. His jacket was worn to a shine. His car, parked outside when she'd arrived, was a rust repair pointillist painting. He'd ticked the 45 to 64 age group on the last census, surely, but that was as specific about as Alvin would make. So the others wanted to take a smoke break. I'm jumping a bit. They drew pre-made rollies from a tobacco pocket, took the matchbox and went outside. No cute moves when you return them matches. The matches represent wins. Alvin calls out, "No cute move yourselves," says Dan, the bartender, leaving his post unattended. Gripping his blackcurrant water in the new silence, Phelim made a show of the gold-clad ring on his wedding finger. He seemed possessed of some unfortunate knowledge. "Is it a he or a she, or a they?" Alvin says. You could almost hear the skin on Phelim's brow crinkle. "The sheep you spared?" Alvin nods at his wedding ring. "The betrothed." "Oh, a she. Phelim bent his head, coy, and wished he hadn't removed his cap so he might tip it now to the mention of her. A horseshoe moustache concealed his smile, but his nesty eyes didn't. "She works on the farm as well." "She does that, and she does the cleaning part-time down at the health centre at Manorhamilton, Caiolín Hughes. This was the first bit of Irish that Alvin had heard in weeks. Since watching Tommy watch a cartoon on TG Cahir for his Irish homework, she knew the words for days of the week from her own childhood schooling, and by assuming that she'd know them, Phelim had as good as given her a gold star. Was that a shiver in her belly, inadequately boiled water, or was it a rush of pride? She'd spent her career checking the undergraduates' patriotism, pulling the nation out from under them with a sobering history of plate tectonics. God forbid she should be beset with patriotism for the first time in her 39 years in An Spa Sláinte of the County Leitrim. The name of the pub is An Spa Sláinte, which means health spa. All of her Irish coming back to her suddenly, she realised the pub's name didn't mean Cheers Spa, but Health Spa. They were satirists, not yobs. "I don't know how she does it," Phelim said. "I have no idea how she does it." He fiddled with his pile of matchsticks, as if his wife might take the same materials and make them a castle. He said, "For tea the night she did lasagna, and better than a restaurant. I'm no use that way, I'm a disaster. I've one pot black and tartar, and I'm only cooking soup from a can." Alvin clicked her tongue. "What took you down? Cream of mushroom?" Phelim turned his other cheek in reply. "Leek." "Jesus, Mary and the Saint of Jerusalem." Alvin swallowed the remainder of her drink and considered the return of Dan, the barman. "I've some expertise in the area of canned soup myself," she said menacingly. Phelim ran a knuckle across his moustache. He thought to ask, was she an artist, maybe? But he didn't want to sound glib. He couldn't picture her with a paintbrush, with a long-handled roller, maybe. A lot of soup dinners was likelier what she meant. He said, "You're cycling a long way, Ara?" "I don't know yet. I haven't planned on stopping, but it's my own foolishness to have a plan. Oh, they're deadly things. Deadly. Deadly." I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Caiolín. That was lovely, and I have to say, as the oldest sibling of in an Irish Catholic family of 5 children with 2 brothers and 2 sisters, as you, when I read the alternatives, I could really relate to those family dynamics. I could relate to the hot mess of chaos, the deep pain, and the very real love that they all shared for one another. You nailed sibling rivalries, not rivalry relationships. And that is spot on because they truly are the longest relationships we have in our lives. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you very much. Now I am pleased to welcome back a real friend of Hoko Palazzo, Caiolín Parsons. He brings so much to this event by guiding insightful and thoughtful conversation with our featured authors. And Caiolín is an associate professor in the Department of English, director of Global Irish Studies Initiative, and the Sonneborn Chair for Interdisciplinary Collaboration in Indian Ocean Studies at Georgetown University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Caiolín Parsons.
Pleasure to be back in Colombia, and a pleasure to be here on stage with Caiolín. Caiolín, what struck with me there was the soup. I was very interested in the soup sticking, but maybe we won't talk about that. We're all hungry. It's a fantastic novel, in case you can't tell. It is a comic novel. It's not unfunny, but it's also about tectonic plates. It's also about climate change. It's about sort of a sense of, well, maybe you'll tell us why she goes on her journey. Give us a sense of why she goes on her journey and about how she navigates these questions of planetary change.
Sure, I might use not unfunny, Cóilín Parsons.
I've read unfunnier pieces.
Yeah, so we meet Alwyn and she's teaching about the collapse of deep time, where processes that should be taking place over millennia are happening over decades. So essentially, she's dealing with a frightened group of students who are suffering the angst, the existential angst that I think most young people, and actually most people are, most informed science-believing people are these days. And I think it's not just people in the field of earth sciences. There's so many jobs where you will brush upon these kind of conversations on a daily basis, even if you're teaching at primary school, and not just in teaching. There are just so many jobs. And so I wanted to, I suppose I don't really enter a novel with an idea of what it's going to be about. But I did have a sense that my partner is an environmental scientist, and I did have a sense that at some point I would need to write about what my experience is of trying to care for someone who works in that field, who on any given week will at least once in a week be approached by a total stranger and ask the question, do you have hope? And having to contend with that question so relentlessly is very difficult, and there aren't really any people looking out for the people who have to answer that question, because it's such there's so much responsibility. It's such a burden to have to answer that, and it's a huge opportunity too. It's not necessarily negative, but it takes a huge amount of energy. You're trying to calculate where that person is, calibrate how much time they might have, what sort of what shape the conversation might take. And also not to necessarily be seen as someone who has answers to everything. So I suppose when I came up with this character of Alwyn, or when she arrived, and I tried to push her away, and I tried to push it away because I didn't think that if I followed her, I'd have a publishable novel. But at a certain point, that's often my process. I kind of try and not write something, and eventually it just wants to be written. And so I was very scared to enter into that novel. But once I got to know Alwyn, she has real big sister energy. And so then there was a bit of relief in the sense that even though I find her really funny, that there'd also be other company in the novel. And then the more I thought about the other sisters and got to know them, the whole story, the idea of a group of siblings who grew up without adults in the room, who were all trying to forge a path forward, as the path's crumbling beneath their feet, that they'd be the perfect sort of characters to to talk about the moment that we're living in. They're all women who kind of express themselves through their work.
Can you give us a sense of, I love your big sister energy, all talks about puny human attention span, that's exactly it. Can you give us a sense, just without giving it all away, of the other sisters?
Sure.
What are their, if Olwen is the sort of plate tectonic person thinking about sort of climatic destruction, how about the others?
So we have the baby sister is Nell, and she is a philosopher who's been adjuncting for nearly 20 years at 3 different Connecticut universities. And so she's dealing with the commercialization of the academy, as everyone who works in academia is. And she would have been teaching the history of Stoicism a couple of years ago, but now she's teaching self-help and happiness. And she really, of all the sisters, like she's the one who most wants to, do what she's doing and actually not really change it. She realizes how precious it is to get to do that work. It's very hard to be a philosopher in any other realm. She's a bit equivalent to being an artist. But she has a mysterious illness that she can't afford to have diagnosed. She doesn't have health insurance, Then there is her step-older sister, Maeve, and she's the one whose PhD is honorary, which they remind her all the time. And she is a chef who lives on a houseboat in London. And she's been a little bit radicalised by her older sister, Alan. And so she's been dealing with local food and trying to work with local produce. I could go on about them all, so I'll cut myself off. And then there's Rona, who is the second eldest, and she is a talking head in Ireland. She's a political science professor at Trinity. She's the most ostensibly successful. She's also a single mum as a result of a one-night stand, but all of her sisters think that it was an arranged insemination. I don't know the term for that. And this guy is kind of trying to find her. But so she's also in the background paying untold sums to have seawall defences built to protect her shoreside mansion in Dublin. So a little bit of she's often the one, people will text me and say, I'm such a Nell, I'm such a Maeve. No one ever texts Rona. So she's maybe one of the more complicated ones.
Except the seawall has been breached this week in exactly where her house is, but now we're all feeling like Ronas. You write without knowing where the novel is going to go, right? But you have a very strong sense of audience, right? You have a very strong sense of readers, who your readers are, how you relate to those readers. Can you tell us a little bit about how you imagine the readers here in front of us here? It's dark, we can't see you, so we have to imagine you.
Well, when I'm writing, I'm actually just thinking of one reader. There's one person that I'm writing for. And so it's never for myself. It's always for this one imaginary person. And they participate in the novel. So I leave out everything that they would fill in. Because I really I try and not write down. And everything about the market makes that difficult, you're always trying. But I really believe that people are willing to watch a Russian character and read subtitles without having them, just speak English. And if that, there being no real reason why they'd be speaking English. So I kind of try and make sure that I don't do the dubbed English, or it's okay to expect the reader to read a subtitle. Sorry, that sounds very alienating or something. I don't mean it. I just mean that I'm assuming that a reader is present with me, and present with the novel, not even me. I'm not even there anymore, but that they're participating in it. And that's really, that's really important to me. And I think that the work is really accessible as long as you read it maybe a little bit slowly. Because whenever I read out, I can feel that people can follow. But I think maybe the culture, there's been such rapid changes in the expectations of the reader, and even the expectations of people watching TV and watching film. The bar is being lowered and lowered, and so I just don't want to do that. So that's something that maybe is going to doom me to have a very small audience for. But
I'd say that's true across your 3 novels. I think really is that in each of them, in their own way, they offer both a challenge and a huge reward to the reader. I think about the first one, Orchid and the Wasp. Do you want to explain where the title came from? I think it's amazing. Is it too long to explain where the title came from?
No, I'm trying to do it succinctly. So there's a type of orchid in Western Australia that resembles a wasp. It's yellow and brown and furry, and it emits a female wasp pheromone. So when male wasps fly by this flower, they try and mate with the flower, and they get the pollen latched to their foreheads. Eventually they give up in frustration and they fly off, and then they're lured by another one of these orchids and they try and mate with that, and they pollinate the orchid. So the orchids are using the wasps, and it's very non-reciprocal. So that's quite unusual in nature. You normally have a symbiosis, you know, a little bird that sits on a deer's back eating ticks from the deer, and it's, so this is called non-commensalism. And because it's unusual in nature, it was striking to me to borrow that as a metaphor, because I don't think it's unusual in society to have people who are exploited. And then so the orchid and the wasp became a shorthand for talking about exploitative dynamics, and the question, is it really exploitation if the loser isn't aware of what they're losing? So that's so that it's not a romance. It has a cover. Look at the cover they gave it. Sure, you know, and then they didn't do a paperback. They've made it look like a romance. It's very spiky.
It is very spiky and very, very satisfying. And I want to, the reason I asked you about that Orchid and the Wasp is that your writing is so full of these really, really rich figures and metaphors. And I assume, I think that's because you started your life as a reader of poetry. You started your life as a reader of plays, actually, as well. And you started your writing career as a writer of poetry. Now, I'm glad to hear you haven't given it up totally, because we heard some tonight. But there's so much depth of figuration and metaphor in your writing that makes it so satisfying to work with. What was that journey like from poetry? I think it was from poetry to novels, and then you took up the short story. So it was, you sort of expanded widely, and then you went back down again, and now you're still writing fiction, longer fiction. What was that journey like from poetry to novels, and what changed in what you could write as you moved from short form to longer form, or from sort of a more intensive form to a more extensive form?
Yeah, and so Cóilín mentioned there that I was reading poetry and plays as a young person. That's because I'm a really, really slow reader. And I really read at the pace that something would be acted aloud, you know. And so I found novels as a kid to be really intimidating. I'd pretend that I'd read them, you know. I would read off a bit on the back, you know. And my sister there would be rolling her eyes, you know, but she'd have read it, and I'd be pretending. But I would have read Yevtushenko, you know, I know even in my violin lessons I just didn't practice, and we just started talking about poetry, and so that's what they were, was my poetry lessons. So because the books felt really intimate and accessible, and it felt like such a conversation, and maybe that comes back to the reader thing. Like a poetry book feels like nobody else is going to pull it off the shelf, and it just feels like such a communal act, like with the author, and so that really then, when I came to prose, I started writing in the same way, because I don't know anyone who designs a poem from the outset. Nobody does that, you know, and you don't even get asked, how do you come, write your poems? Of course, you start somewhere and you follow where it wants to go, and so I write prose like that as well. But maybe just also to mention, I moved to New Zealand in my early 20s, and I had studied in Belfast, and it was full of poets, and so poetry was also something that was sanctioned there, and really everyone was reading poetry, and it seemed kind of part of the cultural landscape. When I moved to New Zealand, I didn't find that to be the case, and I really struggled to write. I didn't have a kind of literary community, and I got a corporate job, and everything was just different. And so out of frustration, and I turned to another form, and then I found a real beauty in the novel form, because although it doesn't have that intimacy, like a novel, it sells itself to you. You know, it has these quotes on the front cover, like it has a summary on the back, like it doesn't need a reader. But on the other hand, if someone does pick up a novel, there's such a generosity in that, because it's unlike any other art form. Like you could walk into a room and see a painting on the wall, and you didn't need to do anything to have feelings and to have thoughts, and and changes in your brain chemistry as a result. You can walk into a room and a piece of music is playing, and it changes you, and you didn't have to do anything. And with a novel, like you have to mark out time in your day and sit down with it and open the, crack the spine, and it requires so much of you as a reader. And so I just then became obsessed with people who would do that, both the people who write it, but also the people who read them. And because there's this longevity, of the writing of it, it's an act that believes in the future, and there's something very galvanizing about that now, but also on the reader's side that they're willing to go somewhere, they're willing to go into the dark, and I think that's beautiful.
As an intrepid reader of novels, I hadn't really thought of it that way. It's a commitment. A commitment between you and the writer, a commitment of time, of generosity. But you have returned to poetry, I take it.
I haven't, no. I wrote the odd poem now and then, but I think maybe I wrote that poem in maybe 2021.
Wow.
But still, that's a lot newer. I have a poetry collection, but I wrote most of those poems when I was in my early 20s, and I'm 40 now, so it's not. I love poetry. I love poetry, like I really do. But when I started writing prose, I felt like I was working with a bigger toolkit. And then when I discovered the short story, I was ruined because it's my favourite form, but nobody buys them, so I haven't got a short story collection yet, although I have one on my laptop.
Caiolinn, in case you don't know, won the Moth Short Story Award and the O. Henry Short Story Award, so a truly outstanding short story writer, and a different commitment too in terms of time. You said you have a bigger canvas with a novel, each of your three novels really makes use of that big canvas. They have big questions at the heart of them. And so this, thing with the alternatives, it's not just climate and science, there's also, food, culture, there's sort of the culture of exploitation and labor and all of this. How do you grapple with putting these big ideas into what is actually stunning dialogue, hilarious dialogue at times? How do you grapple with moving between the largeness of those ideas and the sort of the intimacy of the space of the page?
Thank you. I mean, aside from those big ideas, there's also, poking your sister in the foot with a pin when she's asleep. There's having frozen rhubarb instead of ice cubes in your gin. There's like all of the, stupid stuff as well. So it's not only kind of big ideas. But I suppose I think any person, no matter what sort of job you have, there's a world view that your worldview is probably affected by what you do in some way. So I find it hard to look at any character, like name a character, a plumber, what is it like going from one area of London and doing work for a client and then going to another, and what, all of the human dynamics, the socioeconomic dynamics, whether or not you own your own business, whether or not you've got decrepit hardware, all of it, like any job, any way of spending your time is embroiled in all of the issues of our time. So I would find it really hard not to brush up against ideas, but I never set out to write about any ideas. That's just, I don't know whether that's good or bad, but it's just, I never set out with that. I'm always like envisioning it as a character in a certain situation. And with this one, it was a character with a sort of difficult group of students that just weren't quite there. She didn't know if she quite had them. And they were in first years. First years are always tricky. Teaching is so hard. You have to sell yourself, you have to put on this performance, and it's so vulnerable, it's so difficult. So I was more thinking than anything else about her being in this situation of desperately wanting to get them over a line where it could be more reciprocal, or it could be, and that she loves it, so she will get there, but So it's more that human dynamic of like, how do you get a group to feel like they're in the moment, you know?
I think you get a sense, both from the reading that we have, but also from this conversation, of the incredible complexity of the way that you describe just the quotidian, the everyday, the ordinary, and the way that you're constantly turning over those questions. The description of the pub is, of course, amazing. Can I ask you about your process? I know, I know the answer to these questions. I know where we're going here, but I'm really interested in it. You have a fairly austere process. You write straight through. You don't really go back. You don't return. You don't rewrite. A little bit of editing.
Yeah,
that's bold.
Very much like writing a poem. It's often that you will start with an image, or like a line, and that you follow it. So say for me, I would have seen Alwyn and I would have known that she was in a classroom, and I maybe would have thought, okay, she's Galway, I hear her. And she's not from Galway, but she's lived there for a long time, and she's kind of taken on the wet and windy place. And so I follow her, and because I have this long gestation period, I don't go from writing one novel into writing another novel. Again, another thing that will probably doom me. But because I do think that you need to have downtime. I really believe in like slow work. On a deep level, I believe that. So I think that's the only way that you can make anything good. So, and it's obviously a battle. You're always thinking, I should be faster, I should be but then you console yourself with thinking, well, the only way I've ever made anything in any way good is by doing this slow, procrastinating, self-loathing process, and then eventually.
Sounds like a lot of fun, but yeah.
It's awful, but I will tell you, because I write it sort of in one draft, and I edit as I go, and often, things are pretty much staying as they are. When I get to the end of the novel, I mean, you'll think that I'm on every kind of drug available, because I'm usually come out. I've been in a cave. So I sleep in a different room. I won't wash. I won't cook. I will go for runs or do some exercise, and I will write from when I wake up until 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's over towards the end. Because by the time you get to that point, it's so alive, and there's this feeling of you simultaneously don't know where it's going, but it's got its own force. Even this book is so memorable because I have been in a horrible situation about 2/3 of the way through the book where I was hit by a truck on a Spanish motorway, and I was quite injured. And as I saw the truck was about to hit, it just came right into us at 100 kilometers an hour, and I just thought, I haven't finished the fucking book. Which was like the ultimate, test of, is this the right book to be writing? I just knew, I felt like this is the book. And so then as soon as, in the ambulance, when it seemed like I was going to be okay, it was going to be a horrible few months, but I was going to be okay, I then had the novel as something to do and to be and to breathe, and it was the only thing I could do, except that because Alwyn's very funny, it was very sort of laugh, and so I hadn't if I was having a good day, I would then not be able to write for like a few days afterwards. But the ecstasy of getting towards the end, and so I was finally able to leave Spain after a few months and went to a Seamus Heaney home place event in Maharafelt, and I finished the novel there. I was in the B&B in the morning, and I had no idea how it was going to end. And I was in the B&B, and then I realised I should leave. It was probably 1 o'clock. Then I went to the library, and I stayed there until they kicked me out. And then I went to an ice cream shop, and I sat there. This huge tub of ice cream was just melting because I didn't even, and I kept going up to the girl saying, "I'm really sorry, I just at the end of this book, And it was just like.
She thought the end of you reading your book, and no one writing.
So it's really, the payoff is really high.
How did you know when you got to the end?
Oh, because you know.
That's a terrible answer.
How do you know? Come on.
You'd have to tell us at the end of the book, so we won't let you go into
There's
that.
no other way. It's like suddenly, like there's been no focus on a lens, and then suddenly it gets put into focus, and so you see it.
And that's the experience of reading it as well. And I love that you've used the word slow about 40 times in our conversation. I'm speaking slowly here on purpose. And I love that. So, you talk about slow reading, you're a slow reader, you're a slow writer, you talk about slow time, and again, the puny human attention span versus the long, deep time of the earth. What does that word slow mean to you? Have you thought about that as sort of part of your own sort of pantheon of words and ideas for all of your work? It seems really rich.
Well, I guess it's a very existential word, and it's the thing you can tear yourself apart over, because I think we only get one life. Could be wrong, but
but you did have that accident in Spain, so like you're going.
And so to give yourself the license it doesn't need to be writing something. It can just be about trying to forge a way forward in a relationship. Let's say with a sibling, because they're often very unlike our other relationships. There are people that we haven't necessarily chosen, so their politics might be very different to the relationships that you would choose to have as friendships. They're very interesting for that reason. You stay in them for all sorts of complicated reasons, including things like I think Anne mentioned this the other day, that she'd heard me say this before, but they're the people who know that they know what's happened. They were there, they share a history with you in a way that nobody else ever will. And so it's, when your parents are gone, people will hold on to those relationships despite enormous differences. And so I felt like that's a sort of slow relationship, and often they can become stagnant, but then there can be room for movement, surprisingly, and I think it's the push and pull. When I'm trying to do good work, I'm giving it all the time it needs. And when I'm being a coward and being fearful about my career, or when I'm being fearful about the world and maybe everything will be worse next year, and maybe there'll be no publishers, and then I feel like it doesn't make for good work. So I kind of keep coming back to it as something. And I spent most of my 20s in New Zealand, and I went there to run a marathon and then stayed for 7 years, which everyone always says a very slow marathon. And it's true.
It's very cheap to slow.
But I think, and that's just something I'm always torn about. Sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I would have got better as a writer sooner if I'd have come back and been in the middle of a literary circle again. But then other times I think, there's no way I'd be the writer that I am if I hadn't gone just off, on a huge tangent, and taken that time in a place that's the opposite of a rat race, and where really, no one is kind of saying, when are you going to have your next book? No one, it's got island time about it, and so I found that it's not something I'm fully reconciled with, but I want to be the person who's reconciled with that, and that it's okay to accept that you only have one life and to value the way that you happen to spend it,
And I think the books definitely feel aged, finely aged, and there's a real depth to them that comes out as you read all three of them. Can I ask you one last question? And it's a terrible question, it's a terrifying question. What's coming next for Caiolinn Hughes? And it's okay if the answer is nothing.
I am working on a novel called Irish Tragedy.
Slowly.
Slowly. This one is having a little bit of a different journey to my usual process. So I'm having to go back and I'm unpicking all of the knitting quite far back and going again.
You dropped one stitch.
Something like that. And it's funny because all you need to do is put a line of dialogue in a character's mouth that they wouldn't actually say, and just that little moment of dishonesty because it was funny or convenient for the scene or whatever else, and you lose the character. So sometimes that does happen, that you have to go backwards to go forwards. But I think now I'm going in the right direction. But that and short stories here and there.
Well, I think we're all very much looking forward to the next novel. No pressure, and to the short stories. Caiolinn, love to talk more. I think there'll be opportunity for you all to meet and chat with Caiolinn at the break as she signs books. But please join me in thanking Caiolinn Hughes for a really outstanding
wonderful conversation. And Caiolinn, thank you very much for sharing those insights into your process into writing. And I have to say, as an American, being able occasionally to say Caiolinn and Cóilín correctly in any sentence is really a joy. Now, we're about to go to break, but before we do, we have some appreciations to show. Thank you, Stephen O'Shea, Norma Sess, and the rest of the Irish Embassy staff for all of your support. And let us not forget the Hoko Palazzo board and our fearless program director who gets better at his job every year, Nicholas Trappler. And our thanks to Debbie Lynch, whose photographs are in the lobby, and to our photographer for the evening tonight, Chris Johnson of Johnson TTL Media Services. We want to recognize the Howard Community College, Dr. Willis, and the Horowitz Center staff for their support of Hoko Palazzo. Now, Caiolinn Hughes and Cóilín, couldn't do it that time, Cóilín Parsons visits are made possible in part by our generous Irish evening sponsors, Jean F. Moon, Ellen Flynn Giles, and the Howard Hughes communities. So please see the program for the full list of our acknowledgments. We could not have done this without the help of all of our supporters. Was that not a wonderful conversation with but more fun to come. The members of the group include Deirdre Lockman on fiddle and vocals, Anton Guriev on guitar and vocals, and Corey Purcell on button accordion, sitar, guitar, bodhrán, and vocals. And Corey is an award-winning Irish dancer. Okay, so I want you to imagine this. You're in Galway. It's a quiet night. There's a mist, there's a fog, but you're up on the top of the Crane Bar, which is my favorite great place to hear traditional session music. So you're up in the Crane Bar, the crowd gets quiet, kind of like right now. And out walk the musicians. You get a little tingle in your spine and you say, aha, this is going to be good. Well, imagine you're there right now with poor man's Gambit.
Thanks very much, everybody. It's great to be back here for our 4th annual Irish evening. So, yeah, it's great to be back. We always look forward to this one. And we started off there with a set called, or with a tune called Paddy's Trip to Scotland. And then we did The Yellow Tinker, and the last one was called The Easy Club Reel. And man, what an intro by Ed. I feel like we gotta take him on the road with us and have him intro every show. Did it work? Did you guys feel like you were in a crazy cool spot with mist and fog? Go. Well, we are Poor Man's Gambit. We're from Allentown, Pennsylvania. And we specialize in traditional Irish music, so that's what we're playing for you tonight. Hopefully that's what you're looking forward to hearing. And we're going to continue now with our latest release. This is actually a single that we put out on June 10th. I should remember this, it's our anniversary date, right? Should be an easy one to remember. June 10th of, 2025, we released Willie and Mary. So we'll do this one for you now. It's a traditional Irish song, and this is just kind of our rearrangement of it, so we hope you like it. As Willie and Mary met on the seaside, a long farewell for to take. Said Mary to Willie, if you go away, I'm sure the poor heart might break. Oh, don't be afraid, dearest Mary, he said, as he clasped his fond maid to his side. In my absence don't mourn, but when I return, I'll make you sweet Mary bride. 7 long years have passed, and nowhere at last Mary stood by her own cottage door, while a beggar came by with a patch on his eye, but ragged and torn. Your charity, fair maid, bestow upon me your fortune, I'll tell you besides. The lad that you mourn will never return to make you sweet Mary his bride. She submitted and she started saying, all that I have, it's freely to you I will give. For if you tell me true, what I now ask of you is my ring or a life. He's 11, said he, going said poverty, and shipwrecked he has been besides. But in money untold, pockets of gold, he'd have made his own Mary his bride. Cheeks like a rose, it was Willie stood by her side. Oh, don't be afraid, dearest Mary, he said. It was only your faith that I tried. To the church will away by the break of the day, and I'll make the dull Mary my bride.
Jigs for you now. you're welcome to dance. There's a lot of space right in front of us. Maybe do it in the aisles. But if you feel so inclined, we are playing dance music after all. So these are some jigs, and let's see, the first one. What is the first one? It is a tune written by a very famous fiddler named Tommy Peoples. And this is a tune I believe he wrote for his niece, and it's called Granias. And then I'm going to go into a more modern tune. Well, Tommy Peoples was relatively current, so I guess they're two relatively modern tunes in the grand scheme of things. So the second one is called The Chimer, and the last one is an old tune called Mill Timber.
Yeah, we're going to continue now with a Stan Rogers song. And yes, for those of you keeping score, Stan Rogers is Canadian. He's not Irish, but we're going to play it for you because we like it, and it's been involved in the repertoire for a while.
No matter what you lost, I hold a friend like memory of the garden rise again.
We always get a few questions about the instruments, so I'm just going to take a minute now and tell you what they are. This is a fiddle. This particular fiddle was actually built in Philadelphia in 1892, if you can believe it. It's actually not too uncommon to have violins and other wooden instruments that last that long. I like older instruments having like a story behind them, but some instruments you can't get as old. So I think all of your instruments were built relatively nearly. Of course, there's a lot of old accordions out there, but this one was built in France. And then he got that drum, the Irish drum, called a bodhrán. It is an Irish drum, but it was built in Germany. And the cittern over there, that pear-shaped guitar-like instrument, it's called a cittern, C-I-T-T-E-R-N. I don't know where you got that one. Oh, English, okay. So that's an English instrument that made its way into Irish music around the same time that the Greek bouzouki made its way into Irish music. And they kind of, sometimes people will call them by the name interchangeably. So sometimes people call this a bouzouki, we call it a cittern. And it's basically like a large mandolin with an extra set of strings. And then Anton over there is playing the guitar. All right, anything else you want to add? What? All right, we're going to play some polkas now. There are polkas in Irish music, and but these two polkas that are ones that Corey actually wrote himself.
Those tunes I wrote in 2016. We were overseas in England, and the first one is called Gas Station Sushi. The second is called Whiskey and a Fiddle.
I think the second one probably has a better result than the first one. Better experience.
Any Christy Moore fans out there?
Yeah.
Very good. We're going to do a Christy Moore song for you. And he's a contemporary Irish folk songwriter, so he's still alive, still performing, still pumping out some great songs. But this is one of his from a while ago. It's one of our favorites, and we just started doing it actually at a gig in St. Louis. There was a bar that we play at out there every once in a while. We camp out for a couple weeks, and the guy at the bar asked for a Christy Moore song, any Christy Moore song, and we didn't have any. So we learned one on a break, and he wasn't there when we came back. And we just kind of worked it into our repertoire. Someday we will play it for this guy, and then we'll learn a different song. But this is Ordinary Man by Christy Moore. I'm an ordinary man, nothing special, nothing grand. I am going to work for everything I own. I never asked for a lot, I used to have what I got, enough to keep my family and my home. They say it's made too hard, and now they've handed me my cards. They say there's another way to go around. When the whistle blows, the gates will finally close. Tonight they're going to shut this factory down, and then tear it down. I never missed a day, no went on strike for better pay. For 20 years I served best I could. Now the jerk is spent and they can't afford the rent. Coming off the bridge before the fall. Every day I train savage some of my pride. Find some work so I might pay my way. And everywhere I go, the answer's always no. There's no word for anyone here today. No word today. I never missed a day, nor went on strike for better pay. 20 years I served best I could. And so condemned I stand, just an ordinary man, like thousands just beside me in the queue. I watch my darling wife trying to make the best of life, and God knows what the kids are going to do. Now when we are faced with this human waste, the generation carries society. As long as I live, I never will forget. You stripped me of my dignity and pride. You stripped me bare. You stripped me bare. No word today. No word today.
All right, I'm going to play some rails for you now. Yeah, a set of tunes that I got from a band called Nomos. So I just call this set Nomos. But the real names are Father Francis Cameron, That tune was written by somebody in Cape Breton, actually. And then I'm going to go into another tune called Carney's Cantor. And then the last tune is a tune called the Saratoga, which has become popular in contra dance. For contra dances, it's become popular in America. And they play it more like a hornpipe, but I'm going to play it as a reel. Are you all familiar with slip jigs? Yeah? Okay. So for those of you who might not know, we do know, you're probably familiar with reels and jigs. But a slip jig is basically a jig with an extra set of 3 in the measure. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the meter is kind of in a 3 instead of that 2 that you get with a jig. So we're going to play a couple of slip jigs, and the first one is an old one called Garrick's Wedding, and then we're going to go into a more contemporary slip jig called Flying to the Fla. And the Fla, spelled F-L-E-A-D-H, naturally, is a very large competition for Irish arts, and they're held throughout the world.
before we do, we'd like to give thanks to a couple people. So thanks to Ed Young for the amazing intro. Give it up for him, folks. He's also involved in some organizational and planning things, but we'll recognize him for that right now. And also give it up for everybody on sound and everybody working behind the scenes. We got Sonny, Chris, Linwood, and Tyrone. They're working hard back there. We appreciate all of them. And if you're curious as to who's playing up here for you this evening, on your left you have, from where are you living these days? All the way from, what part of Pennsylvania? From Philadelphia. We have Mr. Anton Guriev on guitar. Over here on your right, we have all the way from Allentown, Pennsylvania on fiddle and vocals, my beautiful wife, Miss Deirdre Lockman.
And playing everything else up here, the sitar, the bodhrán, the accordion, and vocals, and dancing, is Corey Purcell.
So we're going to end with one here called Donegal Danny, and this was made popular by the Dubliners. And the chorus is especially great, so if anybody feels like joining in, it goes like this. So here's to those that are dead and gone, to friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I bid you adieu, saying Donegal Danny's been here, me boys. Donegal Danny's been here.
I remember the night when he came in.
Whoa, that's supposed to be an F. That'll make a big difference later, trust me folks, it'll sound a lot better this way.
I remember the night when he came in from the wintry, cold and damp. A giant of a man in an oilskin coat, with a bundle that told he was a tramp. He stood at the bar and he called a pint, but turned round and gazed into the fire. On a night like this, to be safe and dry is my one and only desire. So here's to those that are dead and gone, friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I bid you adieu, saying Donegal Danny's been here. My boys, Donegal Danny's been here. Then in a voice that was hushed and low, he said, listen and I'll tell you a tale of how a man of the sea became a man of the road, and never more set sail. Oh, like fish that hove and Kenny Becks, Ardglass and Baltimore. Now the crowd has seen who she's beaten me. Now I land my days upon the shore. So here's to those that are dead and gone, friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I bid you adieu, saying Donegal Danny's been here. My boys, Donegal Danny's been here. One faithful night in the wind and rain, we set sail from Kennebeck's town. There was 5 of us from sweet Donegal, and 1 from County Down. We were fishermen who worked the seas and never counted the cost. But I never thought ere the night was out that my fine friends would all be lost. So here's to those that are dead and gone, friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I bid you adieu, saying Donegal Danny's been here. The boys, Donegal Danny's been here. When the storm had broke and brought the boat on the rocks about 10 miles from shore, as we fought the tide, oh, we hoped and sighed to see our holes once more. And we struck a rock and pulled the bow, and all of us just knew that she'd go down. Oh, we jumped right into that icy sea and prayed to God we wouldn't drown. But the raging sea was rising still as we all struck out for the land. We fought with all her cruelty to claim that gallant band by St. John's Point in the early dawn. I dragged myself up onto the shore, and I cursed the sea for what she'd done, and vowed to sail nevermore. So here's to those that are dead and good, friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I bid you adieu. Send Donegal, Danny's been here. You boys, Donegal, Danny's been here. Ever since that night I've been on the road, traveling, trying to forget. That awful night I lost all of my friends. I'll see the faces yet. And often at night when the seas are high and the rain comes tearing at my skin, oh, I hear the cries of drowning men floating over on the wind. So here's to those that are dead and good, friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I'll bid you adieu. Send Donegal, Danny's been here. The boys, Donegal, Danny's been here. So here's to those that are dead and good, friends that I love dear. Here's to you, and I'll bid you adieu. Send Donegal, Danny's been here. The boys, Donegal, Danny's been here. Thanks again, folks, for Poor Man's Gambit. It's been a pleasure to be the part of another annual Irish evening here for Local Awards. We hope you enjoy it. Have a good rest of your evening, folks. Thank you.
Corey Purcell. And how about Corey's dancing? Welcome back to the 58th Annual Irish Evening. Thank you so much for coming out. We really enjoyed your presence. And the thing is, have a very warm and safe drive home. We'll see you next year. Swampshire.